What's up, everybody? Welcome into Tom Curran's Patriots Talk Podcast on a Tuesday in May, late May. Phil Perry alongside Senator. We were out there at the OTAs again. Let's get right to the chase. What do we see aside from Tyquan Thornton's tiny, tiny skinny wrists?
We did get to see those up close and personal. You actually had a chance to ask him about those skinny wrists and adding in the middle of your question, I also have skinny wrists, which I thought was one of my favorite moments of any Patriots press conference really ever.
Tyquan, when we looked at all the measurables, and you can take it for what they were, we did notice that you allegedly have very skinny wrists. Mm-hmm. I also have skinny wrists. Mm-hmm. Have your skinny wrists ever limited you on the field?
No, I mean, the skinny wrists, what you using your wrist for? I don't know. I ain't never heard of that one before.
I didn't want to other him. I didn't want to make him feel as if, hey, wow, you're bizarrely skinny wrists. I'm a lithe little guy, so there's this willowy aspects to my form. Skinny ankles, skinny legs. My wife has said to me in the past, you have the best legs for a girl.
That's so nice of her.
It's really funny. Oh my God, women would kill for your legs.
I think you have to take that as a compliment. Would you rather have good lady legs or just awful legs from any gender?
I think, I wonder what would happen if I shaved them. Like, would they be that misleading? Like, could I? Never mind. Let's get.
You ever do the hot dog or legs challenge from the beach?
No.
Hot dogs or legs?
No.
Yeah, but isn't that a thing?
You ever done that thing with the little part of your?
No, I haven't done that, but this is similar. It's you just take a picture of your legs at the beach, and it's like, hot dogs for legs. I'm gonna look that up right now. I swear to God, I'm not making that up.
Well, you ever done this? You take a picture, you're like up close, and then you move back. Oh my God, it's a crick of the elbow. It's not a crack. All right, 3, 2, 1. We're still live. Here we go. We're still in the pod. I'm counting it down. What do we see out there today, Phil? It was an abbreviated practice. We saw players sprinting again for the second week in a row. Bill Belichick has these guys on the cross-country team.
There's so much running going on, and if they continue this, I think you're going to have a lot of hot dog looking legs out there. You're going to have guys that are just shedding weight under the hot Foxborough sun. Actually, it was a nice day out there today. And yes, interesting that they started practice with that today, Tom. It was a short practice. We should say that. They started with some real conditioning. It didn't seem like it was quite as extensive as it was after practice last week when we were there. But man, they've got these guys running. They've got them moving. That's a huge part of it. We know this time of year, especially I've spoken to Dante Scarnecchia and to offensive linemen about this time of year. It's like, guys, you can't block anybody in May. You just can't. There's no pads. So what do? We run a lot. And so they have the entire team, though, not just the offensive linemen. They have the entire team doing that early.
And Steve Belichick. Perhaps not coincidentally, one of the absences today was Trent Brown. We'll get to the other absences and more left tackle talk in a moment. But I think we should first circle back on, and we gave Bill a break in the press conference today, diminishing returns on the coaching conversation as to whose title is what and who's doing where. But Phil, what did you observe out there on the practice field as in terms of deployment of the staff?
Yeah, I thought it was really similar to last week, where early in the practice, where you have offensively, you have the offensive line on one part of the field, and you have the quarterbacks, receivers, tight ends on another part of the field, maybe some pass catching backs mixed in there as well. The offensive line was run by Matt Patricia, and really, Tom, Matt Patricia, and I should include Billy Yates, but really just those two guys. And then on the other end of the field, where the quarterbacks, receivers, and tight ends were, it looked to me like Joe Judge's show. He was running the minute-to-minute operation there, but Bill Belichick was never far away, and Bill Belichick was pretty involved in terms of sharing. I think he was maybe even a little bit more involved, maybe a little bit more vocal than he was at the practice we were at last week.
Maybe
where
he's letting him, yeah. I wonder if last week was let you guys do your stuff. And I don't want to toe step. He wasn't, it was more, I'll give you, for instance, we're not supposed to do this, but there was a route and Bill said, that's a loop. You're going to loop that. You're not going to be a 90-degree on that. So that's the kind of, it was technique stuff. It was that type of thing.
Right. He wasn't telling players, hey, we're going over here now, and this is what we're doing. It was, he's observing that part, the general direction. And if he sees something and there's a coaching point that he feels needs to be pointed out, he'll jump in there and he'll say, we saw him have long conversations with Mac Jones, but also Bailey Zappi today. He talked with receivers. He talked to tight ends at times. So Bill Belichick's really kind of got his hands all over that part of the offense. But that's what's interesting to me, Tom, is that even though both these guys are very new to their jobs, Judge and Patricia, this offseason, it's pretty clear which coach Bill Belichick wants to be alongside of, at least at this stage of the offseason. He hasn't been with Patricia hardly at all. It's Patricia's doing his own thing with the offensive lineman, him and Billy Yates, and it's Joe Judge who really has Bill Belichick attached to his hip.
I have 3 questions that if I don't send them right off the launch pad in quick succession, they're going to escape me. So be quick on the answers. How was the offensive line comprised today with no Wynn and no Trent Brown? Who are the guys in?
Yadni Kajust at left tackle. Cole Strange at left guard. Andrews at center. Owenu at right guard. Justin Herron at right tackle.
Does Nick Caley have a good arm? Tight ends coach Nick Caley, good arm.
He had a tough day out there. Now, I don't want to make broad sweeping statements, but it was a little windy. I would say he's probably more on the Bailey Zappi end of the spectrum than he is, the Tom Brady end of the spectrum or the Ryan Mallett end of the spectrum. That, sort of is what it is on that front.
Yeah, I don't like it. You could hear him. I was just steamed about it. Feels like relax. You want to tell everybody how good you can throw. I'm like, look at that. Let's take it.
Speaking of Mallett, that was another great moment. And that wasn't a press conference, but it was another great moment in Patriots coverage history where Tom was teaching Ryan Mallett how to throw a football.
Honestly, I mean, look at how that turned out. Maybe you should have Ryan, you bring the ball down by your when you're about to throw it, Ryan. Yeah, it's way down here. Then you bring it up. Do you know that? Are you trying to tell me how to throw? I guess I am.
As he looked down on you, 6'7" Ryan Mallett.
I liked him. He was a good guy. Maniac, but good guy. So Nick Caley, we established that. Is there any way that the way things are trending, and after your conversation last week with Matt Castle, it would be an upset if Joe Judge does not at some point become the play caller? I mean, he talked about to us last week or 2 weeks ago about how much time he's spending working on it with different scenarios. Castle said that the guy who coaches the quarterbacks calls the plays. We're watching it. I mean, it's pretty much a fait accompli, huh?
It feels like it's trending that way, Tom. But our buddy Mike Reese a few weeks ago on NFL Live,
that's the only reason
to indicate that Patricia was more in the lead.
I know. And me, Phil, and Mike spend all our time together. And Mike and I have known each other for going on 35 years. But I have yet to say to him, like, hey, he said, keep an eye on Matt Patricia. I just feel like the landscape has changed. I'm not saying Mike was wrong. Might have been right at the time. I'm not saying he could still be right. But I'll keep an eye on him. But I'm going to keep an eye and a half on Joe Judge.
I just thought the most interesting thing, I think that, and listen, we know the guy's just loaded with interesting commentary. And so it's hard to choose when you talk to Matt Castle. But I thought the most interesting thing as it relates to this coaching staff that he said was, I've never been on a team, 7 teams, 14 years, never been on a team where the play caller wasn't in every single quarterback meeting. And we know it looks like Joe Judge is going to be in every single quarterback meeting. Bill Belichick, Tom, might be in every single quarterback meeting. Will Matt Patricia be in every offensive line meeting and every quarterback meeting?
I think.
Will Nick Caley be in every tight end meeting and quarterback? That feels like double duty. That feels like almost unprecedented. So I lean Judge or maybe even Belichick if that has to be the case. And he made good points as to why. Like, there's just too much conversation in there in terms of finding out what your quarterback likes in terms of matchups or play calls or what he's uncomfortable with, what he's comfortable with. Every scenario gets talked over in those meetings. And if you're not sitting there in real time for those meetings, it might make you a less efficient play caller.
And Joe played the position. Not saying that hey, having played it gives you a special insight, but there's something to that. I think Bill has said that enough times over the years, that where you played, the experience you have, no matter how you gained it, has some value.
And last thing on that though is, and this gets back to, this was something I heard a couple of years ago. So it was a couple of years after probably Josh McDaniels accepted the Colts job and then walked away from the Colts job. But I was told, not long thereafter, and this was in Seth Wickersham's book as well, that Joe Judge probably would have been the guy to step in. And Patricia was still on the staff. And he was still DC at that point. So it wasn't like, he was free to move over to the other side of the ball. But it seemed like Judge was probably going to be the guy to, if not be named the coordinator, be in a really significant offensive role. So there you have it. Good sleuthing by us. Until further notice, Phil and I believe that Joe Judge will be your play caller / offensive coordinator. I mean, we've had a lot. Hey, it's TBD. I could see Bill TBD, doing it, Tom. But that's where it's going. I could see Bill doing it. I don't know if doesn't the Bill aspect of goes to the Bill says, you know what, I can't do this shit anymore. We just gave up 75 points to Miami. When you watch practice, though, doesn't it have the feel of, and this isn't to disparage Joe Judge at all, but it's a very new job for him. And it feels almost like, the professor watching over the TA's shoulder as the TA gives out the lesson for that day's class, or the principal sitting in the back of the room while the 5th grade teacher teaches the lesson at the front of the room. Like Joe Judge is running the minute to minute stuff, but if the boss has something to say, the boss is going to say something and everybody's going to stop and listen. And that's going to be a very interesting dynamic to conquer for Joe Judge, especially when he's, whip cracking in the heat of the moment. And he calls something that maybe a player doesn't agree with. And he doesn't know, okay, well, Bill's in charge. And we can tell that, Joe. We know he's in charge. I don't think you're making the right call here. Not saying that's about to happen. It's May. I haven't seen any of that. But it does not set folks up for the greatest success if you do like any 5th grade teacher. If I saw the principal at the back of the room, being who I was, I would be annoying to see how the teacher would react in that moment and see if they acted out of normal characters. You usually let me do this. I wouldn't do that. My wife's a teacher. My mom's a teacher. Dad was a teacher. Teachers everywhere. I was still obnoxious. Sorry, everybody. So hard to believe. Speaking of the absences, which we were not, let's get into them now. No Trent Brown, no Isaiah Wynn, no Raekwon McMillan, no Jabril Peppers, no Isaiah friggin' Nikhil, no, who else? Judon, did I say Judon? You reading? Did you freeze? I don't think so. I don't think you said listening to me. I am reading a little bit, and I'm listening to you a little bit. All right. So here's what I want to talk about. It's voluntary off-season training availability assignments. I'm not sure. Off-season training availability? What is OTA again? Assignments? Organized team activities. I should know that. Spent a few days down in Naples over the weekend and with my buddies from college. A bit of a cold. I've tested negative a couple times for the vid, but still got a bit of a head cold. So that off-season training assignments, I should know, is not an OTA. I've been covering the league for a long time. Phil, Isaiah Wynn makes $10 million this year. He has yet to show up for the OTAs. Now, maybe he's got a dire personal situation that's keeping him away. And if that's the case, we understand it. And if it's not the case, and he says, I want to work out here where I am, that's fine too. But this pathway to talking about Wynn is being taken because he was absent and because the Patriots are tight to the cap. Wynn's making $10 million guaranteed. No way around it. He's not a $10 million player. He's missed, actually going into last year, had missed half the games, more than half the games that he had been in the league. And then last year, he was their most inconsistent offensive lineman. Wouldn't the Patriots solve some problems if they traded Isaiah Wynn?
Say it.
I hesitate to say, yeah, sure, they'd solve their cap, quote unquote problem. But you have to think about
this on the Hill, and now you're pretending like we didn't.
You have to think about what comes after that too, Tom.
But I'm like, you just like sold me down the river. Now you make me look like I'm a maniac out here trying to trade Isaiah Wynn. We all talked about this. Me and Reese, we all talked about it.
Here's
now
the thing.
I look like I'm a hanging judge out here trying to get rid of Isaiah Wynn, who's just working out on his own. And I don't think it's good.
I think it's something they should explore. So let me just say that.
Okay.
I do. I'm looking at left tackle contracts. And let me just see for 2022, let's see how many tackles are going to make more money than Isaiah Wynn in 2022, because it's not a high number. Garrett Bowles, DJ Humphries, Taylor Decker, Ronnie Stanley, Donovan Smith, Laramie Tunsil, Tyron Smith, Orlando Brown, Jake Matthews, Taylor Lewan, that's 10, Trent Williams, David Bakhtiari, and Dion Dawkins. So that is that's cap numbers. And then cash spent is a whole another random number because you get some rookies that are way up the list. Anyway, he is in the top 15 in terms of left tackle salaries. Tom, it's not that bad. I know you say he's not a $10 million player. It's sort of an average left tackle salary right now.
Agreed. And that's, yes, we can agree. I am not an Isaiah Wynn hater by any stretch of the imagination. I think that he's talented. I have no idea why he played so inconsistently last year, led the team in penalties along the offensive line. There were false starts. There were just general unforced errors over there. He also had some excellent games in which he also had some shit plays early. And then the rest of the game, he was outstanding. Phil, you broke it down a lot with your report card each week. But the upshot is he's entering the final year of his deal. He may have some value. He's taking up a lot of cap space. If somebody else would want to take him off your hands and you can get some collateral back, even a fourth or a third. I don't know if it was going to be a fourth or a third and take on $10 million worth of Isaiah Wynn's salary right now, because he hasn't really shown anything to the league why he would be worthy of getting a $15 million a year salary. But it would cure your cap ill as well.
Yeah. And that's why I think you could get something back for him. Would it be incredible, the return? No, but I think you could potentially get a third round pick back for Isaiah Wynn. And when he's going into the last year of his deal, and you might not want him around anyway, Tom, after this coming season, depending on what his contract demands will be. And left tackles just aren't available hardly ever. And so if the Patriots feel like they're in a spot where, because they have Trent Brown, they are freed up to move on from this left tackle who's been a little bit of a pain off and on, whether it's because of injuries or penalties or he's not showing up to OTAs or whatever else, then that should be something you take a look at. But like big name left tackles, they almost never come up on the market. And he's not a big name. I'm not putting him in this class, but those guys get a lot in return for their team if they get traded. Dwayne Brown, he was dealt by the Seahawks. The Seahawks acquired him
from the Texans, right?
From the Texans. They got Dwayne Brown in a 5th round pick from Houston in return for a 2nd and a 3rd. So that's a pretty good haul. The Eagles got Jason Peters from the Bills years ago for a 1st, a 4th, and a 6th.
Yep.
So he's not that kind of,
those are Pro Bowl / all pro level tackles.
Right.
This is, and I know you're not saying
he's a starting caliber at left tackle, though, is how people would look at it.
Injury prone, puzzlingly inconsistent 1st round left tackle.
See, I think we think of him that way, and I think that's fair. I think if you look at Pro Football Focus and some other places where they're looking at tackle play across the league, they would say, actually, when he's on the field, he's not bad. That's
at some point
how he's viewed.
At some point, though, they have to figure out their cap situation. And that would help it. And I'm only bringing this up because A, he wasn't there and it just casts a light on him. But B, as we're looking at it, we see Yod the Bod over there, Yod Nikajust, and Herron at right tackle. They could put Trent Brown on the left.
And here's what's interesting about that, Tom. So what did we see last week when Wynn wasn't there, but Brown was on the field? Brown missed the practice that we were just at. But last week, Brown was at left tackle.
Mhm.
And we said, oh, hey, makes sense. Wynn's not here. Just take the guy who's played left tackle for you before and put him on that side. The reason why it's more noteworthy than that, in my opinion, and I should have caught this at the time, is that Trent Brown told me last year when I asked him, he didn't practice at all at left tackle, pretty much all of last year. And it was because that was never going to be the plan. If they were going to have Wynn at left and Brown at right, and if one of those guys were going to miss time, they were going to sub in probably Curran. But they weren't going to practice Trent Brown at left because they didn't envision a scenario in which they would want him there. If he was going to be on the field, he was going to be their right tackle. So why have him at left to start OTAs?
Especially if Curran is there.
Curran's there.
Right. So
and he was on the right side. So, right. So are they anticipating not having Isaiah Wynn for a significant period of time, whether it's because they're anticipating injury, which I doubt, or maybe they are looking into not having him as that's total conjecture and speculation on my point. So I just want to make that very clear. Nobody's told me they're looking to trade Isaiah Wynn, but for him not to take a single practice snap at left tackle last year, and all of a sudden the first practice we're allowed to go to, he's there and he's the first left tackle. That to me signals a change. And I wonder if it signals a potential change on the roster with Isaiah Wynn.
Well, I think this all signals to me irresponsible speculation by both parties, yourself and myself. Moving on to more conversation.
Don't say that. Do you believe that?
No, not at all, Phil. We cover the friggin' team. They don't tell us shit. We have to use the smoking guns. We have to look for clues. No, it was not irresponsible speculation at all. By no means. That's how we're supposed to cover the team. Man, we know what team's up against the cap. We got a guy entering the last year of his rookie contract making $10 million. He hasn't been that good. He's not at OTAs. Would it make any sense to move him? Yeah, it might. So let's talk about it.
Okay. I just want to make sure for the people out there.
Yeah, keep it in mind, folks.
You guys were the ones who wanted to trade Isaiah Wynn, and he ended up being an all-pro.
Shut up. It's going to happen in February. I had people the other day saying to me, I said something about Jim.
Oh, you're the one who wanted to trade Jaylen Brown for De'Aaron Fox during the season.
I said, yes, I did, and I stand by that.
Everybody, even, I was reminded of last night when we were talking to Cedric Maxwell in early edition, was even he was talking about trading Jaylen Brown.
I mean,
that's how bad they were.
Just breaking up the Celtics or trading Jason Tatum. Anybody who thought that Jason Tatum should have been traded or was expendable should just move on to cricket. But Jaylen Brown is a walking announcement of sell high, sell high. Because he is a points monger who has some real panache as a finisher, and he's wondrously athletic so that he makes some plays, but he also has the balance of a baby deer on ice. Doesn't dribble very well.
Wait, are you saying trade high, sell high right now? Trade deadline's come and go. You can't trade him before the finals.
No, I'm just saying in general, you can't trade him. But he was the epitome of a sell high guy.
At the time.
Yeah, he might be next year too. I mean, Mark Jackson, I love Jaylen Brown. And when you talk about a player who does so much for his team, jumps up in the air, does 3 spins and whips a ball over his head to somebody who just happens to be there. He had like 3 kickout passes the other night, Phil, where he was totally stuck in the air and he just flung it like a soccer throw-in toward a guy. And it got there and it got to Marcus Smart in the corner and he made the shot. But the planning was lacking.
That's been a real issue. It felt like, at least during this last series, how many passes where guys just got caught in midair trying to do a 180 and kick it back out to somebody who wasn't there and ends up getting intercepted.
That's why the guy who's supposed to be in the corner, if you play that driving kick correctly, and when somebody drives, if you can pop down and get it in front of that driving kick guy, it's like stealing. Back to football. We asked Bill Belichick a little bit today about player profiles. He had Ron Wolf, esteemed scout, Hall of Fame scout and personnel man from Green Bay Packers fame. His son Elliot is on the personnel staff right now. He's one of the execs, but he was at practice last week. Ron was, So we use that occasion to talk a little bit about run and then about scouting in general. And I wanted to ask Bill about how, in terms of scouting, when you look at the profiles of Patriots players or players at general positions that Bill has often embraced over the years, it inevitably has changed. We know how much it's changed because Daniel Jeremiah, former Cleveland Browns scout, now an NFL network analyst or NFL media analyst, once shared a 1995 book on what the Cleveland Browns, under the auspices of Bill Belichick, were looking for at each position. So I asked Bill, does it amaze you how much these positions have changed?
Yeah, we change that every year. And their values. Like what a third receiver was when that was written and what a third receiver is now. And a third corner, for example, or fullback, or, positions that have been are higher percentage play times versus lower percentage play times have significantly changed the values. I think you see that in the salary structures. And we kind of, look at that as well at the end of the year, like what positions are, how does that look just economically? Because that is a sense of a value, if you will, league-wide. And then we can do whatever we want to do, but it certainly gives you a perspective on how the league values certain positions. Understand that the quality of the player at that position has a lot to do with it as well, but, you start to average it out and things like that. And, you can look at, different, 3-year cycles, 5-year cycles, 10-year cycles, whatever you want, and, see what the value of the players is league-wide. And we can look at what it is with ours. Again, some players you'd probably have to exclude because of, their extremely high value, which could skew it a little bit, but still they're all relevant. So yeah, we're constantly adjusting it.
Phil, it's cool because Bill embraced kind of the question about how the Patriots have changed. And he actually used words like third receiver. I was like, whoa, Bill's numbering receivers just like we do. But it was really interesting to hear him speak about the way the game's evolved, whether it be the special teams or how the third receivers evolved or how the value of positions and the salaries have evolved. What did you take away from all that? Because the Patriots right now seem to be transitioning from the power football running team that they became in 18 into 19, and then with Cam Newton, to being a faster team. And defensively, we're seeing a transition as well.
Yeah, I thought it was a really interesting back and forth that you had with him. I added a little bit at the end in terms of asking about the receiver position, but it does get to something that Caserio told me when I had him on Next Pats earlier this offseason. He says, Bill Belichick might be the most adaptable person I've ever been around, is, essentially what he said. And it makes sense, right, Tom? For as the game changes, as the rules change, as what other teams value, as he mentions there, changes, he has to change what he does too. He can't be static in how he views all these positions and how he values all these positions. And so on the one hand, I do believe him, and I think it makes a ton of sense. On the other, I've been going through those scouting reports the last few years and finding a player at every position that he lists.
Yep.
And there's a load of guys that have come either to the Patriots in 2021. It was both Mac Jones and Christian Barmore. They fit the profiles to a T of the positions that they play from those descriptions.
Daniel Jeremiah.
From the Daniel Jeremiah descriptions. They are word for word descriptions of those two players. But then there are others like, guys that have ended up with the Dolphins under Brian Flores or with the Texans under Nick Caserio. And it could be, that could all just be coincidental, but I don't think so. I think there are certain things that he will always think makes a good defensive tackle or will always make a good quarterback. So while they do change, and I'm sure he updates them, I also think there are just some things that he really, really likes, and they're pretty consistent.
What led me into the conversation was, or the curiosity about this specific thing, is Tyquan Thornton. He's a second-round receiver from Baylor who does not have very good, relative to what Patriots receivers normally have, lateral quickness. Doesn't run a great short shuttle, doesn't change direction well. You can show me videos of him changing direction. Yes, I know that he can change direction, but relative to the quick water bugs the Patriots have had in the past, he's not one of those. He's also extremely thin. So what we have is a gazelle. Patriots have not had a lot of gazelles. I don't know if Tyquan Thornton is going to be a violent downfield blocker like Michael Flood. However, he's here. Do you think Tyquan Thornton is, for that reason, I think Tyquan Thornton is one of the most interesting picks the Patriots made this year.
I think he's one of the most interesting picks maybe they've ever made, because he's such an outlier, and because it's a position.
We understand why they took N'Keal Harry. He fit the suit. This guy doesn't fit the suit.
And so it also, though, addresses this very glaring need that they've had. And I've written multiple stories about, talking to other coaches that have played the Patriots, and people are just telling me, I mean, the Patriots run game is difficult to defend because it's complicated and they're tough and they're strong and they're physical, but it's kind of all we had to worry about because through the air, we weren't threatened. We weren't scared. Nobody was beating us. And so what Mac Jones needs to make a leap is they need someone they can throw the ball to for an explosive pass. And so that's why I asked him later in the press conference, with the receiver profile that was listed in those Daniel Jeremiah notes, is it more important now to have at least near the top of the description list somebody who can create explosive plays whenever they have the ball in their hands, or they're a threat for an explosive play down the field anytime they align on the boundary? And his answer was interesting. He essentially said, not really. He said, that they've always valued explosive plays. It's not more the case now than it was 20 years ago, or even more than it was 40 years ago when he was with the Giants. And he lists off a couple guys they had to defend when he was defensive coordinator for the Giants, and how many problems that those guys posed him.
Roy Green and Gary Clark.
I mean, I don't know who those people are.
Roy Green was Daryl. Roy Green was with the Cardinals. He actually played both ways. Gary Clark was one of the three amigos for Washington, who were just, little tiny elks. They were kind of Tyreek Hill. The interesting thing now is, there were fast guys. Stanley Morgan is one of the most explosive downfield players of all time, and he played from 1976 to 86 or whatever it was. But there's more guys who can run past you in the league, and there are more guys who can take a 10-yard or 5-yard throw and turn it into a 45-yard throw. Whether it's Devontae Harris, right? The kid from the Bengals? Smith. Whether it's Devontae Smith. Who's the kid from the Bengals?
Jamar Chase. Jamar Chase?
Who am I talking about? Who's the Devontae I'm talking about?
Devontae Smith is with the Eagles. He's the receiver from Bama last year, another skinny guy.
I screwed up my Bama guys. Jamar Chase.
Jalen Waddle? Were you thinking Jalen Waddle? Jalen Waddle's another Bama guy.
Jalen Waddle, all of these guys who could take it, a 10-yard catch and turn it into 50 or 60 yards. Patriots don't have that, although Kendrick Bourne would be an example of it. The Patriots last year were led in yak by Kendrick Bourne. Not surprising. Their second biggest yak guy was Brandon Bolden. And that was schemed up type of thing. So they need faster guys. And Tyquan Thornton might be the guy to do it. It's just so funny that they went so outside the lines with him.
Yeah, and it does feel like, for a team that so often zigs when the rest of the league zags some, the Thornton pick, let's get speed and explosive playability on the outside, and even the Devontae Parker trade, those felt like zags when everyone else is zagging. It was like the entire league.
You have to do that. You do have to zag at times.
Yeah, I think those are probably, if the Thornton pick hits, those may end up being the two most impactful moves they made all off season, because that position is that important, and the impact that it can have on your quarterback, which we know drives everything, can be so great that if they hit on both those guys, they could be a totally different offense this year. So, and we will praise them as they will deserve if that's the case. But within that idea of needing receiver help and needing it because the rest of the league has it, you do look at Tyquan Thornton as an individual and say, he's really rare. We're not used to seeing guys like that at this level. And so it's almost hard to know what it's going to look like, because it's Devontae Smith. I did this on Next Pats last week. Tom, the guys that are that measured over 6 feet and under 185 pounds at the combine over the course of the last 20 years is Devontae Smith, Mario Manningham, Brandon Lloyd of Patriots fame, and D.D. Westbrook. So it's 4 guys in 20 years that have similar measurements to Tyquan Thornton. So it's hard to say it will work or it won't work because we just, we just haven't seen it.
It reminds me in some ways of 2010. If you think back to the 2009 Football Life documentary with Belichick, and he's sitting there and he's talking about Welker and Moss, and we're screwed if those two guys can't play, and then they lose Welker in the final game of the season, and they get drilled in the wild card round. What did they do the next year to take the heat off their slot and their downfield receiver? They added 2 tight ends. Right now they have 2 tight ends. They have some underneath receivers. They have a good running game, but everybody's able to put, most of their best players in the box. You know what I'm saying? Nobody's scaring them down the field, despite Nelly being fast. We're going to wrap it up. I'm coughing. I think we've gone far as we need to go.
I agree.
Is that bad?
No, I think it's great. I want you to be healthy. Why don't you go get some water?
I'm going to go get water. And I think we took this as far as we needed to take it. Folks, we'll talk to you later in the week. Go Celtics.